Welcome back to another episode of Barbecue and Bottles, and we're on to another steak experiment. And today, we're going to be testing out how 2 New York strips seared in cast iron, 1 in beef tallow, tastes relative to 1 in clarified butter. So this clarified butter we just made at home. We'll drop a link in the description down below if you want to check out that recipe. And then this beef tallow we actually got from our butcher. Now beef tallow, for those of you not familiar with it, this is just rendered beef fat. So as butchers break down their various cuts, they'll save the fat and you can render it down into tallow. Now this is really good if you're deep frying French fries or things at a lower heat. You can impart an incredible flavor profile on your food. So we're going to try and sear steaks, and we'll see if we can tell a difference between a steak seared in clarified butter versus beef tallow. So the first step is just turning on our grill here, and we're going to turn this to medium high. Get all 4 burners on. Now we'll get the cast iron on, and we'll let that heat up. Now normally we get our pans ripping hot, somewhere between 450 and 500 degrees Fahrenheit, but beef tallow actually has a lower smoke point, is 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're going to try and keep both of these pans at 400 Fahrenheit, and we'll just see if we can get the same type of crust and see whether that beef tallow really enhances the flavor profile. And the other thing we're going to do differently here is we want to really isolate for the flavor of the tallow relative to the ghee. So we won't be putting in any of the garlic or the rosemary that we've typically been doing here. We're literally just going to sear these steaks in clarified butter and tallow. So now let's get that lid down and we'll let these guys warm up. So we've got our 2 New York strips here. These are beautiful grass-fed New York strips. We got these prepped by our butcher to be about 1.25 inches thick. So all we did to prepare these was we seasoned them with a generous amount of kosher salt, and we did that on both sides, on the edges, and then we put them on this cooling rack inside of a baking tray and put that in the fridge for 48 hours. That's our typical dry brine process that we've been doing, and we absolutely love it. The salt dissolves into the steak all the way through and gives you a really nice even seasoning. Now if you don't have time to do that, all we'd recommend is you salt your steaks at least an hour before, leave them out on the countertop, let them warm up to room temperature, and that's when you start your sear. So now we're just going to check the temps of these pans with our little infrared thermometer here, and we want to get something under 400, so 350 would be perfect, just like that. And over here we're 320-ish, 330. All right, so we're now going to add in the avocado oil. Now this is a high smoke point oil, so that's why we use it for searing. Now we'll just make sure that's even around the pan here. Got a little bit too much in there, so we'll thin that out a bit. Perfect. Now to add in the steaks. So immediately here we're noticing that there's less of a sear and a sizzle as the steaks go into the pan, and that's just because we've heated the pans up to a lower temperature. So we'll let this go. My guess is it's going to take probably 5 or 6 minutes for the full crust to form on the bottom, and then we'll flip these over and add in the clarified butter and the beef tallow. So we're just checking in on the steaks here, and as you move it side to side, that's still connected to the pan. So you'll know it's ready to actually flip once it releases from the pan, and as you go to turn it, there's no resistance and it just releases perfectly. So now let's flip these guys. The first one, not a bad crust. There's a few gray spots, and I'll show you a little trick to try to fix that. Now the other one, yeah, this one's much, like you'll see, there's much less of a crust here. But we're gonna try and make up for that. So now, time to add in our beef tallow. And be generous with this. We're gonna wanna be able to have enough of that tallow melted down in the bottom of the pan so that we can baste the steak, and that's what's gonna help bring a browner crust as opposed to those gray pieces that you can see here. That basting action will just help to get into all of those crevices. And now for the clarified butter. Again, we want to go in with a generous amount. We've got a smaller pan, so we'll put in a little bit less. Now I'll close this lid down and let that melt. Now let's start basting these steaks. So you're just going to tilt the pan and with a spoon, just put that over the top here. Beautiful. Now we'll do the same with the clarified butter. Get those back on the grill and close down the lid. So now we're just going to get the fat caps on these steaks. So we still haven't reached temperature, but we're just going to give the meat a little bit of a rest here and sear off the fat caps. So now we're just going to flip this and we'll sear the other edge of the steak. And now we'll just put the steak back down on their side here and keep searing these off. And what we're looking for is an internal temperature of 128, and that'll be a perfect medium rare for us. We just checked the temps. We were at about 105 to 110. That means we've got maybe a couple more minutes to go on each side. So now we're gonna flip this over. Just look at that crust coming up really nicely. Do the same over here. So we just checked the temp. Time to take these off the grill. So we've let these steaks rest for about 10 minutes, and now time to slice in. You can still see they're really nice and hot. Alright, so this one right here, this is our clarified butter steak, and this is our tallow steak. To start off with, just grating the crust here. This crust was perfect. We had a really nice golden brown on both sides of the steak versus the tallow steak. We had a nice golden brown on one side, but the other side, it just didn't quite get us there. And frankly, I think that's because we were just cooking these steaks at a lower temperature, and we didn't have that ripping hot cast iron pan in order to get a proper Maillard reaction on both sides of the steak. So I think that's one drawback associated with using tallow instead of clarified butter. Now these, we pulled these probably a little past 130, as you can see here. So the doneness, it wasn't ideal. So this is more of a medium, and we're more of a medium rare kind of household. But now let's try the taste test. So first, the clarified butter steak. So this steak, that was really well done. Really enjoyed that. You can taste the beefiness more from the actual grass-fed steak, and the clarified butter adds a nice richness. But it's fairly beef forward because this was a dry aged steak, and so it really already had that rich beefy flavor to it. So now let's try this steak that was done in tallow, and we'll see if it makes a difference. Wow, so that is a really rich beef forward flavor profile. There's definitely a difference that you can tell there, but of course, you're trading extra beefy flavor for probably less of a crust, less of a crunch. And I don't know that if you actually used garlic and used rosemary and did your compound butter during the resting phase like we normally do with these steaks, that you'd notice that much of a difference. Overall, I'm actually going to give the winner to the clarified butter and not the beef tallow. And the reason is, I think you can get and accomplish that beef forward flavor profile by just buying a high quality cut of beef. And if you really want that dark umami beefy flavor, then get a dry aged steak as well. And then sear it at a higher temperature using clarified butter, and you'll get a more beautiful crust. You'll get really everything combined in terms of that flavor profile that we're getting from the tallow here, but then the crust combination that comes through clarified butter. So overall winner, clarified butter. If you like this video, consider giving us a like below, subscribe to the channel for more of these steak experiments to come, as well as a few other grilling and barbecue recipes. Thanks for tuning in.